flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, that felt wrong. I'm going to find out where the flag went. The investigation will commence.
Senior prank.
Yeah.
It did, yeah. 1.1, call the meeting to order and for the budget hearing. Standing room only. All right, we will proceed. All right, section 2. Everybody have an opportunity to read the agenda and consent agenda as presented?
And whenever you want to, you just need to act on that language up there.
Oh, whoops, I didn't see the action in there. Well, I move that we approve the republishing of the budget as presented.
Second.
Additional discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Missed that. Any questions on the agenda or consent agenda?
I just wanted to follow up. First of all, thank you for the feedback, Daryl. The one about the non-resident students is looking, we had a discussion once upon a time about teacher-student ratio. And I understand what you're saying about as you add students, you hire more teachers, but if we can just see okay, which resulted in this student-teacher ratio, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, really the only way that I can think of to do it would be just to take our total number of non-resident students, and then if you divide that by the total number of teachers, then you would have how many non-resident students there are per teacher. Is that kind of what you're
I don't
thinking?
care about the non-resident students per teacher. I care about the aggregate of each classroom. What will that student-to-teacher ratio be? Because we talked about when we had the last discussion about non-resident students is we have to say no when it tips the scale. So one grade may have a lot more non-resident students, whereas another grade may have, who knows. So, and for that chart to speak to me, the so what to that would be, how does our ratio look? As long as our ratios are safe, move on to the next issue.
Sometimes our ratios are much better because of the out-of-district students.
Yeah,
Because
I
if
think
we have 24 kids in a classroom,
Mhm.
and we take some out of districts, we can make 2 smaller classrooms instead of 1 huge one. Because the funding that comes with those
I
students.
agree with all that.
Sometimes it's gonna have a little bit of a different effect. So it's a really hard question to answer.
It's kind of a compilation of some of the, we don't have a standard for the principal's reports, but some of them do put student-to-teacher ratio as a result of income and outgoing. If we just had that, that's what I'm looking for. I guess what I'm not communicating is the bottom line up front is, I think we as allocators of resources just need to do a double check on the teacher-to-student ratio. And if those are good, I don't care if they're out of district or in district or from the moon. I just want to make sure that my student-to-teacher ratios are where they need to be.
Right, that's part of balancing the out-of-district students is the student-to-teacher ratio.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sure, help me understand what it is you're asking. Do you just want like you want all the principals to do the same thing, where it has the number of students to the number of teachers, or are you looking at just the out-of-districts?
I'm looking at the bottom, let's look at this in an accounting problem. All the work up front, it can be out of district or non-resident, and it could be or resident. The bottom line is, what's our student-to-teacher ratio by grade? That's what I would like to
Yeah,
know.
it has to be by grade, because it doesn't matter if it's not. Because if one class is small or one class is huge, so it would need to be by grade.
Right. That's what I think would be important to me, and I really kind of got that idea from Claudia when we talked about this before, of that's kind of what our responsibility is to make sure that the pot doesn't overflow.
Well, and wasn't it a couple or 3 years ago when we kind of put the plan into place that we're using now, where you and the administrators would keep track of each grade and decide, okay, this is where we have to cut it off at?
Well, or can't accept any new
Right.
ones.
Yeah.
So
Per
every,
grade.
every
Right.
August, when school starts, I don't know if you recall this, I send the board an enrollment update, and it includes teacher-student ratios per grade.
Perfect.
Now, I only do K-5. Now, so if you did 6-12, I mean, you could only do, because they're in all kinds of different classrooms,
Rotating classroom.
you're going to have some that are really small classes, and you're going to have some that are really big. And so you typically,
Just let
what
the
you,
principals manage that.
yeah, well, you do an average, if anybody ever wanted a secondary student-teacher ratio, you do an average. And then I asked the principals to come up with that.
Well, I'm only 1 to 7. I mean, it makes sense in my crazy brain to kind of be wanting to know what that is, but, I mean, once a year makes sense to Daryl. I mean, there's not something that we have to report every month. I mean,
It doesn't change a lot, although some of the principals, I think Sue, I'm trying to remember, I mean, they'll have an enrollment
Yeah.
update, but I don't know if they have a ratio update.
Carrie does a number of students, and then he has like number of teachers in that grade, so it's just a little easy math on your own.
Right.
And like you said, at that level, it's hard to say, maybe not everybody signs up for microbiology, and
Yeah.
that grade, there's only 3, so.
Yeah, and 6, 8, 7, 6, 7, and 8, they're all separate. But in high school, you have a lot of classes where you have freshmen and sophomores together, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And so it becomes a little bit different. But there's not much change between the actual beginning of school on the total enrollment. I'm not saying there's no change, I'm just saying there's not much.
It wouldn't tip the scale.
And the class student-teacher ratio would be very minor changes, because even if you gain 8 kids or lose 8 kids, you're gonna change 1. And typically you gain about what you lose, and,
Yeah.
but, so, I do include that in August, but I'm happy to do whatever the
happy
board
with that.
wants.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, August is good.
Yeah.
Good.
And then, thanks for the information on the Sherry Swans. I just didn't know what her reason to exist was.
Well,
So,
that's a good question. I asked this when I got here, because it started before I came, and this is how KNEA does it, because, and I don't really know this for sure, but I believe my memory and my understanding is that they keep them as district employees. They're not having to deal with the HR overhead and that type of thing. They pay for everything. I mean, we may actually make money on the deal, I'm not sure, but we don't lose any. They pay salary, benefits, Social Security taxes, everything. And so it makes it easier for them, and so it doesn't really hurt us. The only issue would be, and I'm sure the board discussed this when it happened 5 or 6 years ago, is that if and when she comes back, it's almost like a military deployment, my understanding, and that she still has a position. So either she or the person that replaced her, depending on their certification, there would be a transfer.
sure, we would find her a job somewhere.
Yeah, and, right, and I believe there's a reasonable chance that'll never happen.
They seem to like her up there.
Well, and it's an elected position that she serves in there, so I don't know, somebody might be able to tell how often that happens.
Does she represent the district up there, or we just pony up one person and?
I
Does
think it's,
every district have to put her?
no, I think, is it regional? It is statewide.
She represents us.
Okay.
She represents,
Those teachers.
right, but not Lansing, not just
Not
Lansing.
Lansing teachers, everybody.
She's from Lansing, representing the state of Kansas.
Yeah.
But not every district has to pony up a person? Okay.
It's a statewide
travels a lot.
Cool.
There's only a handful, I think. She's an officer.
That's very good.
There's only 2 full-time officers.
Oh.
That's vice president, secretary, treasurer is half-time.
Interesting.
She has a very large presence in the state, representing education and teachers.
And then my last thing was this season pass. Is it worth it to
Yeah,
pay for it?
I don't remember it coming up last year, but typically, we don't attend enough. It gives you a break. If you go to a lot of workshops, then choose that option, because you're gonna end up saving some money. we don't really go to enough to make that an option that we would choose. So we don't choose that one. Am I correct in that? Yeah, I wouldn't want to choose it. It came up a while back, and it just doesn't come after, unless they, I think the first time I was here, they asked if we should join that. I said, I don't think we go enough.
The legal stuff is absolutely valuable with the workshops there.
Yeah, and there's a really good reason why they separate the legal from the membership. I mean, it's a really good reason. I just don't remember what it is.
I'm sure it's.
But they've explained it before. It's like, that's a really good reason. That's all I remembered is, okay, good point. Forgive me.
So thank you for your patience.
Yeah,
on that.
sure.
I move we approve the agenda and consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Additional discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Anybody wish to speak? Nope. All right, Daryl, 3.2, you're up.
Okay, well, I kind of gave away a surprise a little bit, but maybe you didn't read but anyway, just to recap, this is a board goal, our pleasure. If there's anything that looking at you want us to change for next year, you let us know. I talked to Rob, Wes, and Christy just via email about the questions. Very similar questions to what the state required when this was a state requirement of 1-year and 5-year grads, which ended somewhere around with No Child Left Behind. But we can make any change you want. This is pretty brief. I would say with, essentially college freshmen and 19-year-olds, that's not a bad return rate. I'll take that. That's a higher return rate than we get with our family engagement or other surveys. So our kindergarten readiness survey was quite a bit lower than that. Okay, so most of them are full-time students. Some are full-time employed. There's the numbers. And so the vast majority, and these are just obviously the ones that answered them. Very little change, and that is going to be a good sign. And the reason that's a good sign is one of the big indicators of post-high school success for those attending colleges, are they still there their second semester?
Yeah.
And so we like this. And this is the big question. This is really what we're asking. Did you feel they prepared you well? And those are some pretty bars, and that's nice, but looking at the numbers, so we're at 55 or so, and versus 28 or whatever, and then 16 neutral. And one of the important things then is, okay, we would rather nobody disagree with this. And what are the reasons? And that's why you want the comment section. And you may remember I shared all the comments with you a couple weeks ago. I have a confession on the comments.
Okay.
All right? Anybody a part-time priest or anything? Okay, I need absolution. I deleted a comment. I deleted one. I took it out.
Did it have a foul word in it?
It did not have a foul word. That comment was a first-year alumni male requesting that we share his contact information with a first-year alumni female. By name. By name. Can you please share this with, and I would have had obviously redact the name. I thought, you know what, let's not encourage the Lansing 469 dating service. Let's just go ahead and remove, but I only removed one comment.
The courage on that kid, though.
Yes, I thought it was hilarious, but I didn't leave it in there.
Wow, I've got your
Okay,
attention, sir.
that was pretty funny. That was pretty funny. And I was tempted to find out where she is and pass it along just because I believe in young love, but I thought probably not. Yes, well, okay, that's going to lead to a whole different discussion. But anyway, so you saw the comments, and what I try to do is group them into themes. Obviously, there's some that wouldn't fit in here, but I really felt the vast majority of them fell somewhere in these four. And I thought there was some really good news that a couple of the most popular things are things that we worked on at the high school in particular, on the homework policy and vocational technical. The rest of it, you could just simply say independent living because personal finance is part of that. But a lot of them specifically said personal finance. Now, what I would add is that we have several classes that include a personal finance unit. It is required by the state of Kansas. And correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but I believe you have to take one of those classes to graduate. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Say that one more time if you don't mind.
We have several classes that have personal finance included, and I believe that you have to have one of those to graduate, but you feel free to, we'll give you an update on that.
They have to have business essentials.
Yeah, but is business essentials isn't required in itself, is it?
Yeah, it's business essential or something that replaces it.
Okay, and I think all the ones that replace it include something with personal finance. Okay. So but they don't all take business essentials?
Most do.
Yeah, most do, yeah. So, and I think that class was in when this class graduated last year. I believe that was in place at the time. So,
Freshman, it's an early level class.
they may have forgotten it. But it does include credit, debt, investment. And that's, when they talked about personal finance, that's kind of what they were talking about. Yeah, managing money.
The real world.
Yeah, now, it would be nice, and these conversations have occurred at the state level, if every student had to graduate with an actual personal finance course. But you're talking about a majorly, perhaps expensive, unfunded mandate. Really small school districts may have to really change what they do in order to make that work. But the vast majority of districts just have various options, and you're going to have one before you graduate. It may not be personal finance, but it has that as course. It's either going to be in business, in your family consumer science, career tech pathway, one of those two, or sometimes it's in like an economics class. And they make sure you have it somewhere.
And those types of courses also possibly touch on other areas of independent living as well, not just finances?
Yeah, I mean, some of it will be more independent living than personal finance, especially the facts.
Right.
So that some of those are called independent living, and I don't have the name of the courses, and Rob, maybe, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but he's seen these results already, but, so, yeah, I mean, it's going to vary. I mean, you actually, even in PE, you have lifelong activity type learning. It wouldn't be necessarily what they commented on, but it's independent living type stuff.
Well, and wellness.
Yeah, right, which is an important part of our independent living.
Yeah.
But they did tend to focus on the personal finance part.
Did most of them say that, I don't know the question, did they feel they were prepared to go to college? As far as, now my boy will tell you that he didn't feel he was prepared in English because when they told him to write papers in a certain format, he's like, what are you talking, you know what I mean? So he was,
Yeah, it wasn't like it wasn't mentioned at all, but I wanted to give you the comments so that you could kind of make those own judgments, but there weren't a lot that really described academic issues. It was more like, really the ones that said that there were issues were talking about being on my own and being ready, student loans, doing my taxes.
okay, more personal finance.
That's really a lot more of that. I'm not saying there weren't any academic, but it wasn't enough to make me think, oh, that's a common, yeah.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
For years, we had Mrs. Scott and Miss Scott and Mrs. Bach, and they pretty much ruled the English department. And they were personally very disciplined, but they made sure the kids were too. And they did a super duper job of getting these kids ready to go to college and write the kind of papers you're talking about. And I wonder if maybe Rob, needs to take a second look and make sure that we're hitting all the right things in the English department, because sometimes, and also with the transition administrators, has anybody really?
Yeah, well, and there are writing standards.
Yeah, I know.
And so, as you know, we're rewriting a lot of curriculum areas, and
Yeah.
the writing kind of goes along with the same time we do reading, which is going to start this fall.
Yeah.
Reading, writing, kind of, you do those kind of typically at the same time, and when you're buying resources, it really covers in many ways both of those, but, so we will align to, make sure we're aligned to the standards.
I think we need to make sure we're aligned to the standards, but we also need to make sure the rigor is there.
Yeah, and because when you move new people into a position, they may not have a clear idea of the informal role that was played by that teacher before. And it kind of, it bothers me because a lot of kids, when the first year they get to college and start writing papers, all of a sudden they find out there's this whole other world they're not aware of. And I wonder if maybe that's one of the things we need to really take a hard look at.
Yeah, and the writing standards do go K-12.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is kind of a progression. And I don't know what kind of standards really the universities use. I mean, sometimes they're just
They're
asking to
probably
write in
flux, too.
a different way,
Yeah,
which might be,
I think that is a valid point.
I just meant in general, whether it's English or sciences or maths, or, you know,
Yeah.
did any kids feel they, you know, I mean, if it wasn't that,
yeah.
didn't come up, then, you know.
It didn't, you know, really, it wasn't much. The best data on that specific issue would be your ACT scores, because those are meant to align to university standards and requirements. That's what that is for. And, you know, our ACT scores tend to be higher than the state average. And, you know, those are going to change for us, but they're going to change for the state too, because now we're paying everybody to take it once, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But so that's really your best data for measuring. We love the opinions, and that's good, and I'm glad we're doing this. And we're going to do this every year. You asked us, I assumed you meant every year. But that would be good data to look at. And when Holly gives her assessment results in the fall, typically it includes state assessments, it'll be our fall screeners, and it'll be ACTs, and kind of all at the same time is what she did this year.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing this. I know data collecting is not fun, but, and I agree with all your assessments. The one thing that jumped out at me was rigor, academic rigor, and Beth already had mentioned that, so I think we're on the right track. And it's, you never can just take the data for what it is, because some kids who would have been giving glowing reports were busy and couldn't do this.
Yeah.
And some.
It's qualitative data. In regard to the rigor, great point. Y'all may remember that when we had to choose goals for KISA, we had to choose one of 4 R's: relevance, rigor, okay, I'm going to forget the other, what they're called.
Responsive culture.
Responsive culture, and what's the other R? I look it up. Anyway,
Really?
the reason I remember relevance and rigor right away is because those are the 2 we chose. And so the BLTs and the DLT recognized that relevance and rigor were the 2 things that we needed to focus on. And our goals are based on those 2 R's.
Additional questions? All right.
Thank you.
Section 5 or Section 6, any questions, concerns regarding the reports?
Did I just miss Holly's report, or there was
She's
a
out.
teaching and learning report?
She'll catch up.
We've got,
Oh, and I have been copying you to emails, like when we had the OBT visit and the DLT meetings and what we're doing. I send it out to the district and I copy you. So it may not be a monthly report, it's actually more common than monthly. But it's a pretty good recap of what's going on with our KISA process.
all right, we've got 2 executive sessions, one for personnel and one for negotiations. 8.1, I move we go into executive session to discuss an individual employee's performance, substitute teacher applicants, and personal changes pursuant to the non-elected personnel exception under COMA. And the open meeting will resume in the boardroom at 7:35 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
We are at 8 actually, we're at 8.1. I move that we accept the resignation of Jessica Grinstead, special ed and SBS teacher, Shonda High School language arts teacher. I move that we appoint and transfer the following people. Did we appoint Sarah Hallett?
Yep.
Neal-
I don't know how that's pronounced, sorry.
Halakish? And I'm
Close-
sorry,
close
Sarah,
enough.
is fifth grade teacher. Kayla Combs is fifth grade teacher. Kathy Bowman as a sixth grade language arts literature teacher. Denise Dixon is seventh grade math. Emily Snyder, high school math. Jessica Morris for special ed speech pathologist. Heather Trinkle Miller as special ed early childhood teacher. Sierra Cook as the elementary functional teacher. Lisa White, elementary adaptive teacher. Sharon Bates, high school interrelated teacher. And to transfer Tyler Hayes from fifth grade to sixth grade, science and literature. Dee Dee Wiley to from fifth grade to sixth grade, math and literature. Nicole Wallace to eighth grade math to eighth grade to math interventionist. And then also the following supplementals, Kelly Henderson as the head dance coach.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We are at 9.1. Are there any future agenda items anyone would like to discuss?
This is really an agenda item, but something sure, Dr. Stuffelbean, however you see fit to address, does Keisha put out updates every once in a while? Because I heard on the grapevine that there's like female wrestling and like gymnastics are now gonna start being recognized in Keisha.
Yep, they do. I don't know how they communicate it. They have a website where they list all that, but,
I'd hate to generate a
You know,
report for Gary Mattingly, but some way to.
you know, where I read that on Twitter is where I read it. But, I mean, we can do anything the board wants, so, I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Do you know how they operate? Is that how they share that kind of stuff? Is through Twitter or do they have an annual
I don't,
newsletter or?
if there's an email listserv, I'm not on it. I think they do mail out things to the ADs, maybe the principals. I think they mail it to the board president, but I'm not sure. They may mail it to me and then I don't open it up because I get my info on Twitter and their website. I get on their website quite a bit, because just to see who's in the sub-state and state and all that. But we'll do whatever the board wants. You're right about girl wrestling.
Yeah, and I guess gymnastics too, which,
Gymnastics been for a long time. Gymnastics been for quite a while.
oh, has it been? Okay.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that lately.
That's got to be an expensive sport to support. So, as the chief of staff, however you want to handle that, but if you do hear something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a comment. I have recently been appointed to the Department of Education's bullying task force, Blue Ribbon Bullying Task Force, and so any information or comments or feedback that anybody wants to give me that I could take to that and, contribute, both from our district or just in general, I would welcome that.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Is that at the state level?
It is at the state level. We're going to meet 5 times throughout the year, and then we are going to put together a recommendation and present it to the Department of Education in December, probably in time for next legislative session. But I
Is that
definitely,
subordinate to the Department of Education, that task force? Who does it fall under?
it falls under the Department of Ed. Yeah. So anyway, I want to be able to represent our district as best as I possibly can, and then just education in general.
I would just say real quickly, from the guy who's been in the business I'm finishing year number 32, a couple things I'd always like to point out to people. Number one is, what some people think is bullying is actually just bad behavior, and it's not really bullying, and people got to educate people what that is a lot. And then the other thing, and this is bigger, is that it's very difficult to tell sometimes who is the bully and who is the victim, and a lot of times they're both. And in middle school in particular, it's just kids who don't treat each other very well. And then the parents say, that's the bully, no, that's the bully. Now, there are bullies and victims. I'm not saying there's not. I'm just saying that that is not as common as people think it is. Bad behavior is more common than people think it is. And in some cases, it's, you know, when the parents come in, you understand, you know, where it's coming from, but the apple in the tree type thing. But because there actually have policies on parents bullying staff, you know. And so it's not as simple as people think it is really the point I'm just really trying to make.
Well, and to your first point, that was a talking point at just our initial gathering, but, you know, having any of that kind of feedback is just
Yeah.
helpful for me. Because when people are boots on the ground, you know, dealing with it. That's all I've got.
It's a tough row.
Anyone else? I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign.